A participant has joined the meeting.
Welcome, everyone. Paul Casino, Council Clerk, will you call a meeting for us, please? Roll call.
Councilor Brown is the chair
Here.
of the subcommittee here. Councilor Recupero and Councilor Zabit is on
Present.
Okay.
Thank you.
I'll also make note of the fact of the other councilors that are here, Councilor Robinson, Councilor Taylor, and Councilor Wilson.
Okay, we got Councilor Jameer online with us tonight. Thank you, Councilor.
The subject matter to be discussed is the recent shootings and crime increase in Chelsea. Officials of West Dem, Tom Bambino, City Manager, honorable members of the council, Chief of Police Brian Kies, and all members of the public. The conference was requested by Councilor Cooper.
Okay, so thank you all for being here tonight. Obviously, it's a public safety meeting tonight. It's been called because there's been some increase in shootings and some activities here. Myself and Councilor Recupero and Councilor Naomi on the subcommittee, we wanted to get together and address some of the concerns, not only of the subcommittee members, but also of other council members that had some interest in being here tonight to address these issues. So we wanted to invite our guest, City Manager Tom Ambrozzino, our police chief, and we did also invite Roka or Molly Baldwin to be a part of this because I know they do some navigation work out in the community. But my fellow councilor Recupero, give you the opening statement if you'd like to have the floor. Thank you.
Good evening, Chief. Nice to have you. I would like for you to tell the public that our city is safe. A statement from you saying what's going on and how the well-being of our city is. Because a lot of them ask questions, they're insecure, they're unsure what's going on. So I want you to reassure them that our city is safe and that they shouldn't worry too much.
Sure. Okay. I will. You want me just to address the group with some?
Please, Chief. Before that, I want you to, if you want, because after your introductory remarks, I'm going to actually go around to first members of the committee and also our city manager. So that all that you want the chief to ask, or you're going to get into a debating conversation. So if you have something you want him to address, if you can place
specifically,
that, yeah, you can place that out on the floor now.
Okay. What I have specifically to ask is, what all of us specifically want to ask, why is the trend of so many shootings in our city? That's all of us, is the concern of all of us. Why is it such a trend? And I don't know the reason, maybe for obviously it's happening in our city. So the whole thing is they want to know, why is there so many? And why that's the concern of the citizens, because a lot of them don't feel safe.
Sure. I mean, honestly, and thank you very much, and it's definitely the concern of the police department as well. And just to give you just kind of, I guess, a brief outline, that there's been a significant spike in shootings, no question. There's been 14 separate shootings, some of which I think I have here. We have 9 victims that received injuries as a result of these shots fired over the course of about 6 to 7 weeks. In terms of kind of going back in time a bit, just talk a little bit about during the course of this pandemic. The pandemic has been 7 months, and over the course of the first 5 months, crime was down considerably in all areas. Certainly there were no shootings, there was, knock on wood, thank God, no homicides, in the last 3 years. But come the middle of August, we had our first shots fired call in a while with those confirmed shots. And it seemed that there was, as a matter of fact, and for all the councilors here and those tuning in remotely, I try to do my best to not only keep certainly the city manager informed, but to keep the group informed. So you should have text messages on all the shootings that have occurred. In terms of your question, why? I mean, I really wish I had the reason or the reasons why. I have some theories, and some of it has to do with almost like a pressure cooker theory, where again, for 5 months and the months prior to, it has been exceedingly quiet. And all of a sudden, the lid just kind of blew off. And the first question is something like this, is this specific to Chelsea? Are things quiet in Everett and quiet in East Boston and in Revere and Cambridge and Somerville? And the answer is no. The answer is no. I could, and I don't, I guess perhaps unless you want me to, I don't necessarily have to go through all of them, but kind of most recently, I just have a text. I was out in the parking lot that just came in from the state police, and this is from the most recent shooting, which was October 1st. That was on Route 1 at the Carter Street off-ramp. That it was an incident that took place up at the Square One Mall initially. There were, some people were speculating that this was road rage. It was not road rage. It was an incident where the individuals knew each other. There were some words that were exchanged. State police has some good video from up at the mall of some interactions that took place. The victim in this case was grazed with the bullet, male party. He was with his girlfriend and their infant child that was in the back seat. It could have been a huge tragedy, no doubt. Evidently, the couple left the mall after some words with these other individuals, drove home. They live in Saugus. And when they drove to their house, they basically pulled up, and the motor vehicle that was involved, where there were 3 individuals in the motor vehicle, were waiting in front of their house. So again, the parties knew each other. They decided to not go home. Obviously, they were smart enough to just say, we got to get out of here. But some of the individuals, or at least one of them, saw them drive off. They pursued them down Route 1, and they got to the point where they were at the top of the Carter Street off-ramp, and the victim drove off the off-ramp, and there was a number of rounds that were fired into the vehicle, one right by the windshield, the driver's window that just missed his head, one in the back seat that just missed the baby, and then some other rounds in the vehicle. And the vehicle drove down to the bottom of the ramp where there was construction being performed, and there was an officer, Lieutenant Dunn, was doing a detail, and they just kind of waved them over really quick. Police were all involved, and the area was certainly swarmed with units and so forth. At this point, the state police believed that the vehicle that was involved that I put out to you guys was a rental vehicle, but they do have 2 of the 3 individuals identified. They have a grand jury that's been convened. They have really good information that 2 of the individuals of the 3 are also involved in a shooting in Somerville that occurred recently. And again, I'm not trying to pass the buck, I'm just being honest in terms of the environment that's taking place, or the climate that we're in. That the alerts that I get for shot spotter notifications that occur in Chelsea, I also get the alerts for Everett, Revere, Somerville, Cambridge, and Boston. And it's, some of these alerts are really pretty much coming in on a nightly basis. The vast majority of the shootings that we have had have been between 10:30 at night to 3:30 in the morning. There was one that was down on Broadway at Clinton Street, which was about 6 o'clock at night. And that was one, thankfully nobody was hurt, but there was a significant number of rounds that were fired, 24, 25 rounds. It's amazing that nobody got hurt. I know that there was a round that went through one of the addresses down there and almost struck somebody who lives there, young child, I believe. One individual that was arrested, he actually lives on Clinton Street. There was weapons that were involved in that. He had a weapon, and the assailants, if you will, they also had a weapon. They were firing shots at each other. There's been 3 arrests made to date. There's been 5 firearms that have been seized. There's a warrant that was issued on Friday for the shooting that took place the same day, October 1st, as the Carter Street off-ramp, which took place earlier in the night. Late at night, early in the morning, on Sharman Street, for an individual that was involved up there. In terms of 14 shootings, the question could come to mind, are they all related? Are any related? Is there some common denominator? There are at least two separate incidents that are related, meaning there was 2 shootings in the area of Spruce Street and Bloomingdale Street where the shootings are definitely related. And then there were shootings on 46 and I believe 44 Sharman Street. We have the same victim, meaning one victim, he was shot in the leg, and in his motor vehicle was shot up another time a couple of weeks earlier. There's as you can imagine, there's some things I guess I can't say aloud right this second, but there's always more to a story in terms of, not always, there's sometimes more to a story in terms of victims, that sometimes some of the victims have more involvement than meets the eye, at least initially. I can say this out loud, that with the most recent shooting on the Carter Street off-ramp, and again, I just have this because I have it here from the state police, this stating that the victim, in this case, is totally uncooperative, doesn't want to give any information to the police other than what was given that night. His girlfriend was on the news that night giving some information to one of the reporters on scene, which was kind of 50% of what occurred. The other 50% was more or less left out. So that is kind of more or less a common denominator is oftentimes the victims will not want to provide all the information. Some victims will provide no information. Some of it, I guess I understand at times with his concern for retaliation, or concern for retaliation against family members. So I guess, certainly I can respect that. But there's other times when there is the quote unquote more to the story where the victims don't necessarily want to give information to the police because of their involvement and or their ability or their presumed ability to retaliate on their own at a later date. And that's happened at times as well. So the state police working with the Chelsea police, they're heavily involved in following up on all of these incidents. The shot spotter technology is incredibly helpful for us in that there are times when some residents, for a variety of reasons, will not call the police, so that the shot spotter technology is fairly efficient, will notify us to get on the scene fairly quickly. I'm hoping that we're always going to hope, and hoping there's a lid on some of this activity with some of the arrests that have been made. But there's also, there's some individuals that are out there, some live in the city, some don't, that really truly have no respect for the law. They have no respect for their residents. Some of them have, in one case, no respect for a family member, a blood family member, where they're related, very closely related, and they just have no regard for each other. So that's
thank you, and we're going to get back with you. But can you just give us? That was a synopsis of what Counselor did ask you, but I know some of the counselors we're trying to get a lot of this detail out before we open up the speaking direct portion part of this. Can you tell us where these shootings are taking place? I know you said one's taken on the Carter Street off-ramp,
Sure.
One's over by Clinton and Broadway. You said there was two over by Spruce Street in Bloomingdale. There was one on Shaman. But for some reason, Counselor believed that there's shootings that's occurred in our city that is not being mentioned. And I know you said over the last 6 to 7 weeks that it started getting a little, as you said, pressure off the cooker, started spurring up a bit. And I believe you said there was 9 victims and there was probably 14 shootings. So just so we can get an understanding of where in the city these shootings are taking place, because folks you give us the report and we appreciate that. This spot, what do you call it? The spot thing to go up? The spot alert, or
you don't know what it's called?
Yeah, I read it, but it's, no.
We've had it for 12 years. It's called Shot Spotter.
Shot Spot, that's what I wanted to get the perfect. Yeah, I know it's a spotter. So I know they go off, and we just want to know if you can just tell us where these shootings are occurring at.
So I will, but can you go back and repeat what you said to me about, you said some of these shootings are not being reported by me, is that what you said?
No, some folks that, again, leading up to this meeting, and I asked them to attend, saying that there's shootings that do not get mentioned. And I said, well, the chief gives the elected officials a lot of details. And maybe if, we hear tonight where these shootings are taking place. And again, all these shootings you spoke of today, for one, I'm a city councilor, they have already heard about all of them. But we know there's a few more that's taking place. And we just want the public to be aware that what's going on in our city.
I'll interrupt you because you interrupted me. So you're saying a lot of different things.
Okay.
I think you are, because I don't know if you're asking me a question or you're making a statement.
No, I'm not making a statement. I'm
So
just
every-
asking you if you can
So
elaborate on the areas where the shootings are taking place.
I will, but you said a couple of things that I'm going to direct.
Okay.
I'm going to answer directly. You mentioned that you were insinuating that there are shootings that are not being reported. That is false.
Okay.
That's 100% false.
Okay.
And you know this because you and I talk, and you
All
get
the
back to me.
time.
And every shooting that takes place, or every serious incident, I should say, including shootings that takes place, is giving out to the city council and the city manager. I don't know if every city does that, but we do that in Chelsea for a number of years. I don't know if you were insinuating that there's some reason why, I guess I'm the chief of the department, that I would be covering up a shooting. That would never happen.
No, if I can stop you there. We know this, city councils, but public people think that, okay, we're the city council, this is what we're saying. We want you to be able to tell the people what you're telling us.
Okay.
So we know this, I know this, I'm not insinuating
One
anything.
of the things I started to do recently, and as far as to that point, the Chelsea record, so the city councils and the city manager get, for obvious reasons, a lot of information when something occurs. The Chelsea record, there's some things obviously we have to withhold, meaning not the shooting itself, but some of the specifics of the investigation. What I started to do lately with Seth Daniel is give him a version, kind of a different version of the message that I give to you, so he gets the information in a timely manner, and then he follows up with either me or Captain Houghton as well, just to address that point. But your question about where they're happening, the first one occurred on Franklin Avenue, 32 Franklin Ave, and then there was a cluster, somewhat of a cluster around the area of 272 Spruce Street, 300 Spruce Street, and then Bloomingdale. We have a suspect that is, we believe, to be involved in some of those. We have a warrant for that individual's arrest. I don't want to give the name out at this point.
No.
We're still looking for the person. We had a shooting down on Essex Street, the high numbers of Essex Street. We had 2 victims down there. Spruce Street again, 295 Spruce Street. Essex Street again, but this was the 84, is up a bit from the previous one. Actually, stand by, when I mentioned 84 Essex, the call came in, is 84 Essex on the shot spotter. That was the one that I mentioned earlier. It was actually one of those 44 Sharman. It was in the driveway of 44 Sharman, where a motor vehicle was shot up with 10 rounds. Broadway and Clinton, I had mentioned. 33 Clark Ave was another one. 182 Spencer Avenue was another one. And Burma Road was one that was late at night that was, I gave you some of the information of an individual that was by himself in the housing development. And he saw an image in the, kind of in the darkness with the hood on. He saw some muzzle flashes, heard some pops, and then he had a wound to his leg. So there wasn't much information there, but we're still following up, and the Housing Authority has been very helpful with their surveillance cameras. And by the way, I mean, for the residents at home, I mean, and I mentioned this I think in one of the Chelsea Record articles, the witnesses that are in the area, and again, usually 10:30 at night to 3:30 in the morning, there's not a lot of witnesses other than the victims. But the one that happened on Clinton Street, there were witnesses. There was a lot of people around the area, and they were exceptional in terms of them coming forward with information, incredibly helpful, as was the MBTA bus that was in the area, and so forth.
Okay, so I appreciate that, and again, you know, we as city council, and I think I speak for some of the city councils here, we get bombarded, and we say this is not true, this is not true, and that's why we have these meetings, we have this discussion, so you can let us know. These are the shootings that's taking place.
Left the meeting.
We know that you guys are doing your job as much as you can, as good as you can. We understand that what you're saying, that, you know, some folks just don't come forward, and even if they get shot, they won't come forward and say, hey, this is not the way I handle it. So by no means at all, I'm insinuating anything. What I'm trying to say is that we as city councilors, and other city council members will speak in a moment, that we get stopped up and say, what the HELL is going on in the city, like it's a shoot up, gun smoke Western, and it's not. And so for me to defend that continuously, I need to know that, you know, we had a meeting. I invited some of those folks that actually stopped me and cornered me, and they're not here tonight. So that's an evidence that, you know, maybe they're listening on the broadcast, or maybe they just don't feel comfortable. But I told them I would address the questions that they wanted to try to get addressed.
Well, one more point just on that, you can always direct them to our website, because we will put a press release out, posted on our website.
A
Certainly the media,
participant
to the
has
extent that they're
joined the
interested, and they
meeting.
usually are, they get it. I'm just thinking out loud that maybe what I could do is the information that I give to the city councilors, again, it's more information that I would release to the public. I could tweak that information and generalize it more, and then basically put right in the message that if you want to further, because usually I say it's confidential, as you guys know, but usually I could perhaps tweak it a bit and say this is, you're free to disseminate as you deem fit. And then if you have your own groups, your own, people on your phone that you want to forward text to, at all hours, or if you want to do it, I could be fine with that. I mean, I would be fine with that.
Yeah.
If that's something you're interested in.
I honestly, myself, I don't need to go in that direction. I just need to, because I'm out there. I deal with folks and I tell them this is what's going on in our city. And I'm 100% a defender of what we're doing. If something's wrong, I'll stand up on that too. But I try to defend, and I also believe that it's important for us to get together and have conversations and let others know. Councilman, you got another question?
Yes, I have a question. Besides all the shootings, right, Chief, there's been a lot of activities with drugs, especially around my district, in certain spots. And lately, I've got complaints from people that some of these drug addicts are going in their houses, or they're going on their porches, and they have no regard for anything. They just do, they do it right outside. I know you've done your best all the time. You're trying to fix them. You can't fix them all, because I understand that. But what can you do to alleviate such a problem as all these? Why are they congregating in one spot, Chief? What makes them go there?
What spot is this? Tell them what spot this is where they're congregating.
Why not? He doesn't have to say it out loud. I know, because we talk.
Okay, great. I'm sorry.
Well, I would say this, that, certainly all of us in this room and many who are not in this room, I think we're all doing the best we can to answer your question, to really, we have a drug problem in the city, in the state, in the country, we know that. In terms of like your area, or really any area, people are using drugs. They have to be buying drugs someplace. And I think the information that I'm able to receive from counselors, from residents, that I pass on to the professionals in our department to conduct surveillances, conduct investigations, and follow up with search warrants. It's incredibly helpful. I know you've been excellent in the past with information that's come to fruition with things take place. But in terms of the quote-unquote address of the day, you're right. Some of these individuals move around. Some of these individuals, for whatever reason, they get arrested. There's a search warrant in their house. There's drugs seized, money seized, everything seized, yet they're right back at it again months later, which is my
But they don't come from here, Chief.
Some do.
A lot of them are outsiders. I hear that a lot of them are outsiders. They're coming in. I don't know. And there's another problem with these that they're having now, is that they go inside houses and taking packages. When the UPS and Uber leaves or whatever, they leave anything outside, right? Sure. They go in and take them. A lot of people don't report these things. I don't know why they don't do it, but some of them do. And they tell me that they go in and take the packages.
You're 100% right. That's a huge problem. It's a problem everywhere. And I don't know if that's a new business model for some of the Amazons and so forth. That I know it happens in my house. They leave packages right in the front stairs. And I think perhaps for some of the residents, maybe we can give some advice. I think they can coordinate with the delivery personnel that they will not to deliver unless someone actually answers the door. But that, you're right. That's especially in neighborhoods where the houses are close together and people can just walk down the street and they can see a package right there, and just, especially if they look around, they don't see a camera.
So what would be your advice to the people? What would you tell them what to do? I know you just said, what if they do? They ask me sometimes and say, what should I do? I don't have no answer. I can't tell them what to do because I don't know how to. You're a professional. You could give them more advice than I could. The only thing I can tell them is try to be there when you deliver your packages. But a lot of people say, I work, and they put it there. And that problem didn't exist until about 2 months ago. Before that, they really were stealing packages out of people's houses.
Sure. A lot of it is not because I'm a police officer, just thinking a little bit of common sense. I think maybe if neighbors know each other, and then they can put a little note in their door for the delivery person to knock on, the door next door type thing, and then coordinate in advance, leave all packages at that location. I think at night, and we've been talking about this for a long time with like the motion sensors, as far as like the lights, just people creeping in driveways and checking door. Because these, some of these people that commit these crimes, they love the darkness. And when they start to walk in an area and then a motion light goes off, they're going to move on. So, and those are relatively inexpensive. So I think that's some good advice as well.
Chief, so is this an opportunity for also some of the navigators that you have working with you to do some of this outreach in the community with some of these areas where we feel that, you know, if we knock on the door and just say, hey, this is what's happening in this neighborhood, maybe we should have something like you know, what you just explained, neighbor to neighbor, just looking out for one another. You know, it's a way that you can also, you know, have the engagement with the police without the uniform, I guess the navigators to work with you. And you can also make them aware of some of the things and some of the safety precautions. Maybe you can just work with your neighbor and work with them to have a package picked up.
Sure. I mean, honestly, we can do anything that you want. I mean, we work for the community, but the only reservation I have, I know like the 2 street navigators we have right now, like Giovanni brought up about the drug problem. I mean, they're really geared towards the people that are substance use abusers, if you will, and they need assistance. As far as, you know, I'll just say this out loud, I wouldn't want, because we do a lot of engagement with the public, I say we, the officers, whether they're in uniform or plain clothes, I wouldn't want necessarily for that to no longer be part of our function about engaging neighbors and reaching out and working together in partnerships to solve problems because of, you know, some people that may think that's a bad idea. I think that's an excellent idea. It's a sustainable idea. It's something we've been doing in the city for a long time, and I don't think, you know, for any reason, you know, that we should change that. I think that, you know, we have, give you an example, and Tom was on an email a short time ago with one of the counselors that, you know, we have an officer like Sammy Mojica, where if any one of you or anyone reaches out and says, I have a problem and this is the address. And it's kind of a recurring type problem. Someone like Sammy, that's kind of what his job is. Rather than call the police and send a unit, Sammy has that conflict resolution skill set that he can sit down with somebody during the daytime, have that conversation, hopefully resolve it then and there. But if he has to bring it up a level because it's not resolved the first time, then, you know, there's always fines. We don't want to fine people, but you know, that we have that ability. So we're probably, I'd say 85 to 90% successful in that regard. And, you know, I would like to continue with that. Actually, we have other officers perform a similar function, but not that a civilian group, whether they work for the police department or somebody else, couldn't do that. But I think, again, in the interest of furthering partnerships and community building, I would not want to abandon that. Because again, it's been so successful.
Yeah, I know Sammy was very helpful with myself and Councilor Todd with the firecrackers and also some neighbors and stuff, so that was very helpful. Councilor Zabit, Naomi, do you have a question? Or would you like to say something to the chief?
I don't, only to just really back up everything that's been said already and how much I appreciate as a city councilor that we are privy to the information that we are. Thank you, Chief, for that. And I also think that it's a great idea to not necessarily continue to send those texts and have them be available to the public. As you said, post that information as you do. And whenever the public is wants to know about what's going on, that we are able to direct them to the website and they can get that information. And I appreciate that all that information is available so that people, rather than just hearing rumblings, that they're able to get a very concise and clear picture of what is going on and how it's being addressed, because I think that's really, really important, and that, you know, your department is doing a great job. So, and I also second that the community involvement is really, really important. And Sammy did help also with a resident in my district who was having an issue. And that I appreciate the fact that we're not just having police officers going to people's houses and telling them what they should or shouldn't be doing, but that you're having somebody from the department who is going and actually communicating and saying, look, this is what's going on. This is how it's affecting the neighborhood. Can we work together and try to make this better? And in the situation, you know, that I'm talking about, I definitely saw that works. So I think overall, this is a really, really hard time. Shootings are up everywhere, as you said, Chief. So it's not just Chelsea, and I just look forward to it becoming better. And thank you for doing the work that you do. This has been great. Thank you.
And by the way, if you or any counselor, if an incident occurs and I send something out and for whatever reason, you're getting a lot of inquiries about what occurred, if you want to just ask me one-on-one, because most of you do ask me things one-on-one, if there's a kind of like a scrub version available, or if you could just disseminate what I sent out, I will either say, yes, disseminate that, or I could tweak it a bit, you know what I mean, and just say, yes, send this instead. We can always do that. It takes me just, a minute or two, no problem at all.
We appreciate that, and that's, again, some of the concern. And for us, it's good, but sometimes they're like, well, you're city councilors, you're supposed to say this, you're supposed to say all this, but we know that it's true, and we know it's tested, and it's results that's coming from our department, so that's why we had it. Mr. Manager, do you have anything to say? Would you like to give us a few comments or anything?
No, I think the chief has pretty much said exactly what I would have said.
Okay, thank you.
I have one more question.
Okay, can we give some of your comments?
Sure.
Okay, great. Any of the colleagues here at the table, Council Robinson?
Let me put on my military hat. We know where the hotspots are.
Mm-hmm.
Is it possible, like on a Friday night, having a cruiser with the blue lights on, parked in the neighborhood, so that there is a presence, and if they have to respond to a call somewhere else, they can actually respond from where they're located?
So, we could talk about that. I know that, just trying to think out loud, because I was reading something someplace in another state that was something like that took place. I know that the only times that we do anything like that is during a snow emergency, but I think that, I was trying to think if someone brought it up from this group in the past. It's not a bad idea. The only thing I'm trying to balance is I don't necessarily think that we want to create some type of panic with some of the residents. I know that, like, for instance, when we talked about the fireworks down in Folk Park, one of the concerns initially was we said, let's turn the lights on, just the regular lights. Mm-hmm. And we did. And then the concern was that some of the residents may not like that because, it's there, right? But I think, like, with the, honestly, the same with the cruiser lights, depending where you live, they are really bright. And so we could definitely talk, you and I and others perhaps could talk about that and maybe come up with something more specific. And I would not be opposed to it if we could just kind of, hone it down to a certain area, and if we can get the involvement of the residents, perhaps that live in that area, to agree that maybe they think that's a good idea, if that works.
Yeah. My only other thought is I miss Jason Holmes.
Yeah, me too.
I think that was a big part of his community, and he had a relationship with a majority of the people in the community, and sometimes he was able to filter information to kind of cool things off. So that aspect is gone.
As far as I know, he's back working in Chelsea, I thought.
I haven't seen him.
So, Councilor Todd.
So one of my questions, and what I have people asking me specifically about the shootings, is how much of this is gang related, and how much of this is connected to other shootings in other communities that is also gang related, and I think that's what, random shootings, I think, frighten people less than gang related stuff, because they understand that this is kind of a, it's an ongoing problem that is hard to get rid of, and I think you guys have done a great job in conjunction with the state police and the feds to kind of clean up some of the worst offenders and some of the worst gangs. So I applaud you guys for that. But there's still this kind of, and that's what people are coming and asking me.
Sure.
So I don't know if you can address that here, but if you could, that'd be great.
Yeah, no, definitely. It's a great question. It's very, very, very rare that a shooting is random, meaning someone just drives down the street and decides to just blow rounds off. Even when there's rounds that are blown off at 3 o'clock in the morning, whether up in the air or at a stop sign or at a home or at a car, it's usually done for a reason, usually to send a message to someone in that area, if not that specific residence. And in terms of gang violence. It's somewhat of a loose term that, there was a time when, gang A versus gang B, and, we're a bigger gang, we're a tougher gang, and we're gonna show you. But, now, over the past, I'd say at least the last 5 years, if not more, a lot of it is, these kids are affiliated with different groups. Sometimes they feel as though there's strength in numbers by that affiliation. But at the end of the day, when someone takes out a gun and points it at somebody else and pulls the trigger, and you would think that something serious must have had to happen in order for this person to do it. And then we come to find out that oftentimes the common denominator is just the quote-unquote disrespect word, meaning someone got disrespected, and then how? What was the mechanism that occurred? And usually it's social media. And someone sent something out on social media where other people read it on some type of publicly available platform, and it's like, I'm gonna show them, and I'm gonna get them back. And this isn't just Chelsea, this is all over. So in terms of motive, and Giovanni brought that up at the beginning, like, why is this occurring? We often find when someone is identified and located and arrested, and we're going through the prosecution, in terms of motive, usually that's oftentimes that's the reason. Oftentimes it's relationships where, yes, someone's affiliated with a group, a gang. They also have a girlfriend, usually they're men, and someone was talking to their girlfriend. So they're gonna show them. Pretty insane. You would think.
Yeah, it doesn't always have to be about drug turf or something like that, but I mean, I understand that.
Well, there is one other point, since you just mentioned drugs,
Yeah.
that there were at least 2 shootings that were related to drugs, related to the sale of drugs, related to, and then you might guess, well, what's the drug? Is it heroin, which is everywhere? Is it cocaine? Is it marijuana, which is legal? In some respects, and it's marijuana. I mean, there is still a street market for marijuana, and there are incidents of homicides that have occurred, thank God not in Chelsea, but right on the outskirts of Chelsea, and the motive was the sale of marijuana. So that's still very real.
Thank you. I know Councilor Lopez wanted to say something, but I also want to, just in case the councilors on the live screening, if you would like to speak, please raise your hand and you'll get my attention. Councilor Lopez, you have a question?
Yes, thank you, Chief, for coming and
Thanks.
questions. One question that I have is, well, actually, I was going to ask you, if you mentioned something about maybe having cruises somewhere, especially in that area, before this 6, there was most of these things that happened. No activity, drug.
Councilor, I'm sorry, if you could speak a little louder, so if you can.
Yeah, so drug activity and obviously issues about few shootings around. What Councilor Robinson mentioned is if we can have maybe more patrol in that area, especially these 2 districts. This is where most of the things are happening. Maybe not with the lights probably, because like saying people probably at night, oh, I can't sleep with the night, the lights is making them they can't sleep. Go to the window. How about that? More patrol in that area, or more visibility. And also, there are those shootings. You mentioned that well, my question is, is all these people know each other every time there's a shooting?
So, I mean, of the 14 that I mentioned, some know each other, most don't. Most of them were not related specifically. I think that in terms of, like I said, we can definitely talk offline and see if we can figure something out, but at the same time, I can say this, that there were, if not in these specific incidents, although there was some where the officers were there in like less than 30 seconds because they were right in the area, to your point. There's been times, and I just thought of one specifically, where there was a shooting in Bellingham Square. This was a few years back, but there was 2 units, 2 police cars in Bellingham Square, more or less side by side, and someone walked out of 2 Casa and fired rounds right at a car driving by, while the individual was walking. And, so that some of these individuals, even though there's increased presence or there's police presence in the immediate area, some of them, whether they're under the influence of drugs, alcohol, they're just not, not the brightest bulbs in the world, some of them just don't care. And some of them, like I say, in terms of the lack of respect for law enforcement, the lack of respect for law and order is incredible. It really is. And usually, and again, the numbers aren't what they are, but they're usually young men. they're usually young men, and if Molly's on the call, Molly deals with a lot of young men with, you know, dangerous paths, if you will. They're usually 18, well, actually lower than 18, probably 16 to like, 24. And so thank God for people like Molly and her organization and others that are trying to get these kids out of that dangerous lifestyle. But, some of them, and now it seems like more individuals want to get their hands on a gun. They feel a lot more comfortable when they have a gun. Thankfully, most will never use it, but there's some now that perhaps would never use it in the past, and now are not afraid to just take it and point it and pull the trigger. And the first time they do it, and nothing happens, and they feel some type of thrill from doing it, the next time it's easier. And then we deal with, unfortunately picking up the pieces sometimes. But to your point, Ennio and Leo, we can definitely talk, and I think we can put our heads together and come up with some solution that will satisfy everyone and figure that out.
And Chief, are you finished, Council?
No.
Go ahead.
With this increased activity of drug addicts, that for a while they used to hang around here, and then city did all the work that was done, and they disappeared. But now it seems like they're coming back. They're walking around Bellingham Square every morning. I go to work at 6 in the morning. There are about 10 there. A moped park on the sidewalk, people hanging around all the time. I see my street, Essex Street, Sherman, Maverick, everywhere. I know we don't have the answer. What can we do?
Yeah, I know. I mean, I wish I knew the answer.
Drugs somewhere. Somebody's probably selling drugs somewhere. That's why they hang around here and go to that place.
Well, at the end of the day, you're right. And at the end of the day, there's we have, what do we have? Between 40 and 50,000 people in 2 square miles. If we have, 1% of the population that's addicted, I'm sure we have more than that, but if we have one, that's a big number. It could be 400 or 500 people. And some of them very visible on the street, like you mentioned. Some of them, it isn't like they need to do drugs once a week to feel good. They need to do drugs multiple times a day. And we see them, they're out there, we deal with it. And I say we, I mean all of us, as a community and so forth. So, I think we've come a long way. I mean, but will there ever be a time when Chelsea is completely drug-free? Be awesome if there was, but we've got to be realistic that, the issues that we have to deal with in society are in society. So, I think we can just try to continue to stay at it, continue to try to be more innovative and creative. I know the navigators are going to come up here, I think, in a couple of weeks, and they're going to give you they do a great job. They really do, and I won't put the cart before the horse, but they do a great job. But for individuals like that, and again, when I mentioned Roker and other organizations that are just out there, North Suffolk Mental Health and others, just really trying to make a difference. You guys have heard about the hub before, and rather than us just kind of sit back and wait, trying to be very, very proactive and find someone going down the wrong road. And usually with the hub, the common denominator is mental health and drugs. And there's been, at this point, over 800 success stories. Some people have fallen back into that trap a bit, but there's others, many, many, many others that have not. So, and Chelsea, kind of a bit, is becoming the envy of some other urban environments where they, what are you guys doing and how are you doing it? Again, we're not perfect, but we're hopefully we're getting better at it, over time.
Chief,
Could I just add one thing, sort of in response to Councilor Wolfer's point that he's seen an uptick? I mean, one constraint that has been a little bit difficult for not just Chelsea, but all law enforcement to deal with was COVID. So COVID closed courthouses.
Good point.
COVID required the correction facility to release probably more people than they wished to. COVID made it reduce the amount of beds that were available for detox. So all that in combination meant some of the good tools that we had pre-COVID, getting people sectioned, getting them into detox, were less available for us for a fairly significant period of 3 or 4 months. Now, courts are starting to reopen, facilities are starting to have a little more capacity. So some of these constraints that we faced in the last 4 or 5 months that have hindered our ability and the ability of the navigators to be at their peak efficiency are starting to go away. And so as courts reopen, as there's more opportunity for people to get into detox, I hope we're gonna be able to get back to sort of the pre-COVID norm where we were, where things were far from perfect, but we had a little bit more ability to control some situations. Would you agree with that, Chief?
Yeah, I forgot about that. It's an excellent point that
I was gonna bring it up.
most recently we were, so to Tom's point, when, usually we have some people, not just that are addicted to drugs, but they're addicted to alcohol. And they're very visible, we see them out and about. And there was a time when we had a tool known as a quote-unquote Section 35, where we could get them the help that they needed on an involuntary basis. In order to do that, we needed to take them to the courthouse during court hours. And the court has a protocol that they basically take someone's temperature before they take them in. And of the 12 individuals in a short period of time that we took down, there was 11 of them that had a temperature, and they believed that they were sick, and they would not take them. So it was kind of a catch-22. So you might ask, well, you as the police department, can't you have someone that's heavily intoxicated, we're going to take them to a hospital. But if they're just kind of intoxicated, not just intoxicated, but they're visibly intoxicated, can't you just take them into protective custody down the police station? Over time, we always did. We averaged about 500 PCs a year. But now, in terms of COVID, is the wild card, like Tom said, and we were trying to limit the amount of people that we took into custody in general in the police station. And we've had over 10 officers test positive, a couple out right now. So because of that, we're really trying to dance between the raindrops. It's been a challenge. And, Tom and I have talked at length trying to come up with that happy median on how to address this. But yeah, I'm glad you brought that up, because that's a big part of it. Certainly.
I was actually going to bring that up. I was thinking that because of the COVID, there has been an absence of that contact to go out and reach out to those folks, because we have seen a lot of the increase in it. And you know what? A lot of the increase in the folks that the second part of the conversation we talked about, Bellingham Square, they're just out there. They're somewhat recovering or dealing with an addict. They're not out there shooting. It's a bad image. People just look at that as a bad image. It's nothing we really can do but try to offer the service that we had in place prior to that. So I think, we have to also look at, in light of COVID, the absence of the navigators out there trying to really navigate and talk to folks and try to steer them in the right thing. So we see this and we know that, but again, it's always good for the public to realize that also. Chief, I know Councilor Damali wants to ask a question or a comment, but we're talking about the shooting, the guns, not the shooting. Is there any type of initiative that you are sitting down with your colleagues and trying to figure out, there are guns here, people are using them, how can we get them out their hand? I remember when it got to a level where there was a lot of guns, we did a buyback program with guns and stuff like that. Have you given that any thought about initiatives of how we can get some of these guns off the street?
Sure. Someone who has their hands on a gun, some of these individuals that we're speaking of, they're not going to give the gun up, ever. The gun buyback programs, I'm not against them. We could do them. A lot of it is optics, to be honest with you. A lot of it is does that reduce gun violence, and some of these cities that have done these, they don't. But if it was in terms of stats, and we wanted to say that, hey, last year we took 100 guns off the street and 90 of them were from the gun buyback, I guess the 100 number looks good, but is that really, a lot of these guns come from, elderly folks that someone died and they actually had legal guns and they were just sitting in a house and they want to turn them in, and that does happen now. We are able to get them to a dealer, explain that they can make some money on doing them. But the individuals that the kids in the street, they get their hands on these guns. They're not, for $100 or for a gift card for $150, they're not going to give them up. They spend some good money, on the street to buy them. We have to your point, what are we doing to get the guns off the street? We have, no secret, I'll throw it out there, we have federal agencies. One of them is the ATF. They are excellent at what they do. What they do is they work with X amount of agents and then X amount of what we call TFOs, task force officers, which are local cops. We have one of our officers is a TFO, works with the ATF. They have investigations similar to the DEA, when the DEA looking for drugs. They have individuals that come up on our radar that are selling guns in city or in Chelsea or nearby. And we make these cases, we seize a lot of guns with the help of the ATF. We have active investigations right now, as we always do, active ongoing. So that type of resource is very valuable to us. And then in addition, just officers out in the street taking every precaution to be safe. And I mean, some high court, you know, it's not, police officers can't walk up to somebody and just look at someone and think that they look dangerous and stop them and pat frisk them. We can't do that. We need a certain level of evidence called reasonable suspicion, not just that they're committing a crime, but separate and distinct that we believe that they're armed and dangerous. The court is very specific on that. But when those conditions are met, officers are in positions to put their hands on somebody, to stop them, meaning from leaving based on certain information, pat frisk them, and we've come up with a number of guns in that respect. And then certainly just the shot spotter that I mentioned initially, that because that goes off and it's within 30 seconds of the shot being fired, the scenes that we respond to now are considered hot scenes as opposed to the average time when shots are fired and someone picks up the phone and calls the police. This is on a national basis based on some research, is 3 to 5 minutes. So police officers, even though I just got the call, it was right there at Clinton and Broadway, and I'm right in Home Depot, and I'm there in 30 seconds. The reality is if that was someone just calling on the phone, it's 3 to 5 minutes. People are long gone. But with the shot spotter technology, it's almost instantaneous, so less than a minute. So that's been very helpful as well.
Okay. Councilor Damali Vito, are you there?
Can you hear me?
Yes.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. Chief, thank you for being here, and I really do appreciate this dialogue. I look at this a little different. I recognize that we tend to go to the police whenever there are shootings, but really there's nothing that you can do to essentially stop them. You can only respond to them. But I guess my concern is that we're seeing an uptick in mental health episodes and crime. These are all symptoms of what people are feeling as a result of the pandemic and all the stresses that are associated with it. I'm just curious about the capacity of the Chelsea Police Department, and I would like to see, I know that Sammy does an amazing job, but is Sammy the only one with the capacity to be able to do the work that he does? And how many of your officers are actually trained in mental health to be able to deal with some of the things that they're seeing?
Yeah, no, excellent question. No, Sammy, I mentioned Sammy because we all know him. I mentioned Sammy because he comes from a unique background in that he worked for the police department as a civilian, and he was trained as a conflict intervention specialist back in the 90s. And no, I mean, there's many other officers, and a lot of them, honestly, are younger officers, incredibly skilled. We send them to all kinds of trainings. To your point, there is something called the One Mind campaign, which is an International Association of Chiefs of Police initiative. And the One Mind campaign stresses, or what they advocate for, is that every single police department have 100% of their police officers trained in mental health first aid, which we have 100% of our officers trained in mental health first aid. And they advocate for 20% of the police department to be trained in what they call critical incident training. And actually, strike that, crisis, CIT, crisis intervention training. And this has to do, in our department, we don't have 20%, we have about 40% of our officers. The training is more intensive, it's a week-long training. There's a training center over in Somerville. We applied for a grant, we received it. We have grant funds to send our officers to that week-long training over the past 2.5 years. Things have slowed down during COVID because there's no in classroom training. But our goal in Chelsea, which was going to be fairly unique, was that we wanted to have 100% of our officers trained in mental health first aid, and 100% of our officers trained in CIT as well. So the idea is, in terms of without going crazy with the CIT, but it's a matter of, you're 100% right that the common denominator in many of these situations where there's weapons involved, oftentimes, especially when someone wants to take their own life, is mental health. So what we try to do is slow things down. If someone has a weapon other than a firearm, create distance, de-escalation. All these themes are stressed in the CIT training. And what we applied for in addition to that is another grant. And the grant would be, there's a, I'm trying to think of the exact name of the model. There's a kind of a co-extensive model whereby some departments like we have Framingham, we have Arlington, that come off the top of my head, Taunton. They have someone, they hire a civilian, a mental health clinician that is assigned to the police department. And they co-respond, it's a co-response model. They will co-respond with the officers, and they work like a staggered schedule, so it won't just be during the day. It'll be an overlap between the day into the night hours. But there's a co-response. So if we have someone in crisis, God forbid someone's trying to take their own life, or something like this, rather than the officers just with that 40-hour training, we would have a professional respond with them, so that we wouldn't be in a situation where, God forbid, someone has to take someone's life, or they take their own life. So, yeah, that's something, mental health in policing in general, but certainly here in Massachusetts, with our eye towards mental health, is a significant goal for all police departments. In Chelsea, what we want to do is we hope that we can be the model, because we, you know, with 100 or so police officers or 107 police officers, we're not 1,000, you know, because we have a number that's manageable. These are goals that we can definitely attain, and then hopefully become the model for other departments to follow suit.
Thank you, Chief. And just one last comment. I just want to say that, you know, I'm of the belief that we should be investing more in mental health professionals, not only in our schools, but also in the police department, as you mentioned, because nobody wakes up and says, I want to go do drugs and be a drug addict, or I want to go and kill somebody today. These are symptoms of something that's a lot deeper, and we need to have serious conversations about that. So I really do appreciate you, Chief, for kind of thinking that way, and kind of leading the way in the police department. It's something that, and you have a great reputation outside of the community. And it's because the innovative way in which you approach the department, and I do appreciate that. I also want to co-sign what Councilor Lopez is saying and seeing an uptick of folks that are on drugs in parts of the neighborhood. I'm seeing them near my neighborhood. They would never come up to the top of the hill, and you're starting to see them like in the backyards. And so, I mean, I tend to, you know, respond with care and with love when I see them and say, you know, you can't be here. Do you need help? That kind of thing. But I just, you're seeing it a lot more, it's more in your face, more blatant. So I just wanted to co-sign what my colleagues were saying, and thank you. I'm all done, Mr. Chairman.
Thank you.
Okay.
I'm gonna start Councilor Robinson, and then I'll ask, I'm sorry, Councilor, and then I'll ask Councilor Cooper to give it out. Chief, thank you very much for your patience and being here. I know it's a hot seat. Thank you.
Going back a few years back, didn't you run something like that with Mass General on the weekends that somebody traveled with the police department?
Well, yeah, I mean, we have a program that we've had since 1998, which is called the PAC program, which is the Police Action Counseling Team, and that's Georgia Green. You guys probably all know Georgia. She works for MGH. There was a time when the PAC team was 4 members, and they would respond 24 hours a day, 7 days a week. But they were usually geared more towards childhood trauma. So could be you know, God forbid, it could be a homicide. It could even be a domestic, and with the children present, rather than police officers do the best they could, trying to comfort the child, and then that trauma could lead to other problems down the road. We would have a clinician respond that night, work with the children, and then develop a relationship moving forward. We still have that. George is still on board. She's phenomenal, does a great job. But this is having an embedded clinician in our department, and again, and I hope well, I'm not confident, but I'm optimistic that we'll get this grant. I think we'll be a game changer. You know, to Damali's point, I think you know, that co-response model and mental health is so prevalent, not just in Chelsea, but like all over. And I think if we can certainly just like, you know, be there that night is step one, but step two, just develop the ongoing relationship thereafter to connect them to services. And in the long run, we'll see, you know, a better Chelsea. I think if we can attach that model.
My other question is, what are the types of guns that are being shot in the community?
Yeah, I mean, great question. I mean, the scary guns, meaning there was a revolver that was recovered the other night, which we don't see many revolvers anymore. It's just 6 bullets in a cylinder. The guns are, you know, 9mm, 40 caliber weapons. These are guns that have 1 bullet and then 13 bullets in the chamber. I mean, 13 bullets in the magazine, 1 in the chamber. So, yeah, a lot of rounds can be fired really quick. So yeah, that's what, there's a lot of semi-automatic weapons that are out there.
Councilor Recupero?
I only have a couple of questions for you.
He
Thank you
said
for
one.
coming, and thank you for reassuring the people that our city is safe. For all this city hasn't been so bad, besides the rational shooting, which is practically happening all over the place, and you can't explain, I can't explain, no one can explain why they're happening, and it's happening not just here, all over. Besides that, our city's been pretty good. I guess it's as good as anywhere else to live, just as good. You have done the best job you can do, and I think it's a great job. Your department is trying to do the best they can, considering COVID and all this other stuff we have. And I would just like to hear from you one thing, Chief. If the situation continues the way it is, right? How would you resolve it? Would you resolve it with more police officers being in the street? How would you assure the people that if this continues, what would be your assurance that there will be a safer Chelsea?
So, I don't know necessarily if the answer is more police. I think we have to find those individuals that are responsible. We have to utilize every mechanism that's available. Technology is great that we have available. I mean, we talk about crimes from 20 years ago. We didn't have cameras around like we do today. The shooting that I mentioned on Route 1 the other night, I mean, the individual that decided to go over the bridge, what happens when they go over the bridge? There's a picture of their license plate, which led to their identification in terms of who they were and backing it up, looking in the mall, private cameras, just the technology that we have is phenomenal. So following up on every single lead that we have, hoping that we can convince members of the public to come forward with information, either hopefully coming forward and identifying themselves, but if not, even on an anonymous basis, so we can follow up with different leads, is very helpful. But yes, certainly find those, not flooding the city with 200 cops. Find those individuals responsible, hold them accountable, identify them, locate them, arrest them, prosecute them, and move on. But I think that that's probably the best mechanism. Again, to your point, crime has gone down in our city year after year after year. This is violent crime, year after year after year. And but for the past 6 weeks with this spike, but it is a significant spike, which I definitely recognize. I would be talking to other police chiefs and saying, how's things in Chelsea? And I always knock on wood, but I say things have been incredible. Things have been incredible. But at the same time, there is that balance, like I've said I think multiple times during this meeting. People are getting their hands on weapons, and they're not afraid to pull the trigger. And again, all of us in this room, we're from a generation that we were growing up as kids. We never saw guns. We never saw guns. You know what I mean? If you heard of a shooting, once every 5 years, it was America. We just never saw guns. Now they're so prevalent, just across the board.
Thank you. And one thing that I want to ask you.
Yep.
Lately, from some of my constituents, they're saying there's prostitutes going back to the same area where they've always been. You know the area, right, Chief? Which what I'm talking about?
Yes, I do.
Why are they going back there all over again?
I mean, with street prostitution, certainly, individuals, whether it be the, individuals that are on the street performing those functions, or it's the men, usually men, they go to isolated areas where it's dark and they think that, there's nobody around. That's usually, the rationale behind it, certainly, but all we can do is continue to ask our residents for help when that occurs, meaning if they see, and this is still kind of a challenge, and I'll just throw it out there that, someone, I was going to say a suspicious vehicle. What is a suspicious vehicle? A vehicle that they're not used to seeing in the area, so they call the police, and then the police go down there and they're obliged to take an action. And what is that? I mean, that means they'd have to roll up on a car in a secluded area like you're describing, and perhaps put the lights on or even a flashlight. And then it's like, well, I'm just here reading the newspaper. Why are you, quote unquote, stopping me? So there's always that balance. It's like, well, we're not stopping you. We're there for a reason. We got called there, following up with the call. So trying to maintain that balance, always with our mind towards enhancing public safety, but certainly being respectful of individuals that we encounter at the same time, because you just don't know. Some of it might be innocent behavior. So that can be a bit challenging.
Why do you think the prostitution is back? Your opinion?
My God.
Because of COVID-19?
COVID-19 is something that, so, Thank you, Counselor. We want to end this here. Chief, we want to thank you again. I think for the most of us here, we hear the concerns in our community. We did not want to ignore this. And I think I speak for a lot of city councilors. We didn't want to ignore that there was, in many of the speakers, council members tonight said an increase of some of this activity. And from what we hear from you and the city manager and some of the recommendations and stuff, and we realize that some of it has to do with the COVID-19.
Sure.
Some of these folks that's on drugs or just out there, you know, they don't have the service, they don't have the engagement from the navigators, from the people from, you know, North Suffolk or Roker and stuff. And we hope that, you know, in your opening statement, you talked about the last 6-7 weeks where we've seen an increase. Now that we're getting ready to seem like we open up a little further in our city, we hope that these organizations and will get out there and be able to navigate. Navigate is something we think that outreach would help folks, and we appreciate your time. And I apologize if you thought I cut you off. We know you can go all night long. We wanted to keep you in here, get you to answer some questions and hear what we were hearing, and we wanted you to address that, and I think we did. If anyone has any more last comments, I'll let them have a say-so. If not, if no one has any comments for the chief or the city manager, I'll close the meeting, and thank you both for being here.
Great.
Thank you, Jeff.
Okay, thank you.
Thank you. Good night, everybody.
Thank you, guys.
Todd Taylor made me see all that stuff, man. Blame him. You know, Chief, good job, man.
I made you say it because I get in trouble when I
Thank
say
you,
it.
Sean, for being here, Mr. Manager.
Then I